about stakeholder network and business model. So today we have a conversation on distributed testing and certification. We are 6 in the conversation. So we have Mark Croes and Gertrude Kingelman from Centexbel, Silvia Pavlidou from Mirtec, Guillem Camprodon from Fabla Barcelona, IAAC, Hannu Salmela from VTT, and myself from IAAC too. So we will have a small conversation on distributed testing and certification. We will first introduce ourselves, then looking at what has been done inside the RESRVIST project about certification. And then we will dive into the topic of distributed. What is distributed testing and certification? How the stakeholders here have been involved and have questioned this concept during the RESRVIST project. So first, I will stop sharing my screen and introduce you the speaker. And I will ask you just to present yourself and the organization briefly. We can start by Silvia, if you want. You're the first on my screen. So.
Hey, hello to everyone. So I'm Silvia Pavlidou, and I work for Mirtec, which is a technology company in Greece. What we do is mainly divided in 2 axes. So one is research and development, and the other is quality control and certification for different types of materials and products, including textiles. So in RESRVIST, we are part of the distributed certification scheme that is being established for the face masks.
Great, thanks, Silvia, and welcome to the conversation. Maybe Mark Croes, and after Gertrude, you can go ahead for representing Centexbel.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me here today. And I'm Mark Croes, consultant medical and hygiene at Centexbel. Is very similar organization as Mirtec. I can just repeat the description that was given by Silvia, basically. So we do also have 50-50 parts in activities like research development, support of industry in developing new services and new products. And then another part is related to testing and certification of all kinds of materials, mainly focused on textiles and plastics. We are a notified body recognized for certification of protective equipment. And myself, I'm closely linked to the medical and hygiene testing laboratory, which is already a long time involved in testing surgical masks, which that's one of the reasons I'm here today. Thank you.
Okay, so transition to Mark. I'm Gertrude Kingelman, and also from Centexbel, where I'm actually a research scientist, so more working on research and development projects. But actually at Centexbel, as Mark says, we are really diverse on what we do. So somehow we have research, we also have testing and certification, but there are always links between both. And actually it's this link that's brought me into this RESRVIST project with the role of kind of working together with different partners. And I'm happy that most of them are represented here, designing a blueprint for being able to efficiently test and certify masks or other medical products in case of emergency. So you will hear more about it in the coming slides.
Yeah, thanks, Gertrude and Mark. We can go to Hannu Salmela from VTT.
Hello, my name is Hannu Salmela, and I'm from VTT, Technical Research Center of Finland, which is a rather large research organization in the north with over 2,000 employees. My responsibilities relate to, let's say, ventilation, air purification, and filtration techniques and their development. VTT is an innovation organization, not perhaps usually doing testing, but during COVID times, we were quite heavily involved in mask quality assurance and ramping up domestic PPE production in Finland. In RESRVIST, our main responsibility perhaps is in the digital a platform that we are developing, but we also are contributing to the testing and certification part of the project. Thank you.
Great, thanks. And then we can go to Guillem from Fab Lab Barcelona. Can you introduce yourself?
Good morning. I am Guillem Camprodon, Director at Fab Lab Barcelona. Fab Lab Barcelona is actually the first Fab Lab that established in Europe back in 2007, and we are a leader in the maker movement by developing projects that help this network of more than 2,000 Fab Labs nowadays worldwide and many more maker spaces to impact better on society. Our primary goal is to do research and innovation that's tested here in Barcelona and then scaled through that network, as well as supporting other ventures that are willing to learn from maker practices and bring them into their own research. This is a case of RESRVIST, where we are in the project taking care of designing emergent blueprints for scenario cases, as well as supporting training and development of some of the solutions. At the end, I would say that our main goal is to bring here some of the experiences that the maker movement had during the COVID response crisis by developing certain very fast, let's say, solutions into the emergency market, and of course understand if actually they are capable to do so, and actually that's those are best practices that we could learn from.
Thanks, Guillem. And I just reintroduced myself. So Marion, I'm also working at Fab Lab Barcelona IAAC. I was involved in the research in RESRVIST, and as we are leading one activity about replication, the certification part was inside, and we had really great discussion already inside the project. So we can think, I think we can move from the next step. I will invite Gertrude to tell us more about what the RESRVIST Certification Blueprint, and then we can discuss it a bit together.
Okay, thanks, Marion. So I will try to share my screen. Okay, so now you should see the presentation in the right mode. Okay, no news, good news. Yeah, so as Marion introduced, so now I will go through the RESRVIST blueprint for testing and certification in case of emergency. And actually the whole blueprint, okay, it started a bit from learning from the COVID crisis, because so far it still remains one of the largest global health emergency, not only in Europe, that we had so far. And actually what we did here in RESRVIST, we kind of look at what happened during the COVID crisis, and especially regarding testing of mouth masks. So the graph you're seeing now, it's actually plotting the evolution of the number or the capacity of testing masks during the COVID time. So this is starting from, wait, I'll just use my pointer to make it easier. Start March 2020, so the outbreak of the pandemic in Europe, until July 2022. So basically what was considered in most countries where all lockdown measures were almost released, so we can consider it as the end of the high periods of the pandemic. So going from the beginning to the end, so we almost triple the capacity of testing masks, both surgical and respirators, FFP masks, but still this is not enough. So which means in case of emergency, what can we do to be able to test efficiently masks? So this was the inspiration that brought us to design this blueprint. And in a nutshell, the blueprint is mainly, as I said already, focused on improving the testing capacity. And it is a kind of making it not only efficient in terms of using the capacity, but also easy for access. This means for manufacturer having products and wanting to have them tested, they should be able to access locally, which means having a testing center in their city or in their country. They should be able to access them, and from these local testing or certification facilities, then they have access to a larger network, which can bring them back in the end the tested or certified product as they ask. So they don't have to go alone through the whole process or going to another country because they don't have specifically the type of test they're looking for locally. So this is a way to also involve local partners into the testing capacity in order to enlarge it and also use it efficiently. And it's also enable new partners or new testing facilities to also enter the network. And this will be done through round-robin tests, which is basically if a partner come in for testing a certain product, so they will collaborate with Accuracy test labs, which have already proved that they are capable of testing that product in the required quality meters. So they will test the same product and compare the results. And if these results are the same or in the same range, acceptable range of quality, then they can enter the network for testing this same product. So just figuratively, graphically, schematically, if you would like. This graph here is just to show what we want to achieve. So on the left-hand side, you see here the marker just showing the situation we faced in March 2020 at the start of the pandemic. We had a large request for testing, but still the testing capacity was still small, and which then resulting in also the supply of medical products that were needed was also small because of, both were kind of complementary. What we want to achieve with this blueprint is to be able at least to aim to having kind of supply and demand, a high availability of testing capacity, or which also means using efficiently the available testing capacity. After saying that, now we come into what schematically look like the blueprints. So this blueprint starts like from the left-hand side to the right-hand side. So this is also the way I will walk you through this blueprint. So on the left-hand side, you have a manufacturer, which is somehow the clients or the main user from this blueprint. It is the manufacturer. Here we consider all producers or all importers of products that would like to have them tested or certified. So on their side, they have to make sure that the products have the right quality requirements that they need for their starting product. And this, they can do it again in collaboration with their testing lab, their local testing lab, if they don't have any idea of the product's quality and so on, or what to look at onto a quality certificate to know the quality of their product. And here through these arrows is basically to have one entry point. So the manufacturer had a question or wanting to test a product, so it will enter the blueprint, meaning contacting its local certification or testing facility, and also in the quality department at the company, in a non-accredited test lab, or having other type of alternative test protocol, which will then process to a screening. It's called here pre-screening. So it's basically rapidly testing to check if a product at least reply positively to the minimum required quality standards. And then from there, if this pre-screening is positive, then they can contact an accredited test lab, which I showed again before, that these are really in scarce capacity, so not a lot of them. So here, if we make sure that the amount of products coming to be tested in those labs are, let's say, 80% past the pre-screening phase. So this means we are actually using efficiently the capacity that we have available for those labs. And then if needed, depending on the type of products, we can go through certification, which is not needed for many products. So here you have 2 arrows, so which means like if you are in the RESRVIST network, so you can certify your products as manufacturer. So which means that in case of emergency, you can only have a notice which proves that your product is compliant, then you can resume production. Or if you are then a testing facility, you conducted already the round robin tests, then you can also continue to be considered as equivalent to testing products in a required quality. So in order to respect this, there are a set of recommendations, but actually I'm not going through all those here because all of these are in detail in a report that is available. And also in this webinar, we're going to address many of those, which goes actually at the interplay between the industrial manufacturer, the policymaker, and also research centers. So now we can dive into I will just stop sharing to make it easier to see. Here. Now I come back to the guests. Thank you for being here again. I start with Silvia from Mirtec. I know Mirtec was when you presented, you also involved into testing products. So actually, I would like to know like your experience from the COVID time. So regarding this blueprint, where do you situate yourself?
Right. Okay. So if I start with what happened in our case during COVID, actually, when the first COVID outbreak started in Greece, there were no companies producing any type of face masks. So therefore, there were also no labs able to test or certify such products. However, during the first months of the pandemic, some companies managed to adjust their production and started producing surgical face masks. But since there was no possibility to test their products in Greece, they had to send them abroad to different certification labs. And since at that stage, the certification labs for face masks were overloaded, since they were not too many actually, the companies had to wait long times before they put their products on the market. So I think this situation is well in line with what you are saying, and shows that in times of crisis or in times of high demand, it's not just about adjusting the production, but also the testing and certification needs to be adjusted so that products can quickly enter the market. So in our case, within RESRVIST, we set up the one test method for the surgical face masks, the breathability test. So we acquired the equipment. We set up the method and also participated in a round-robin test. So at this stage, we could support the first the pre-screening, let's say, as a non-accredited lab, and provide an entry point to the network for local companies who are producing such face masks.
So just if I understood, you kind of somehow already literally been doing this blueprint somehow, being a local entry point for companies in Greece to be able to have a product, their masks tested and certified.
Yeah, but until before the project started, we were not able to perform any test ourselves. Now we can do some pre-screening and fast forward, let's say, the face masks to our partners for the rest of the certification process.
Okay, thank you, Silvia. Now I will move actually to VTT. Thank you for being here, Hannu.
Yes, my pleasure.
Yeah. it's also in the same direction too, because when you introduce yourself, you were not VTT core activities are not at all for testing masks, but then you were involved into testing masks or during the COVID pandemic. So actually, what is your experience on this, and also related to the blueprint? Where do you see yourself?
Well, going back times, VTT has had certification and it still has some, but mostly we have outsourced it, or let's say some other, let's say, partners are doing those tasks in Finland nowadays. But maybe the background for us during spring 2020 was that there were found some let's say deficiencies, shortcomings in the quality of imported masks to Finland from some other countries, and some let's say governmental bodies wanted to assure the quality, and since there were not any certified, let's say, test facilities available those times, so we took this challenge, and maybe our background, we have been doing a filter media testing for 40 to 50 years before, so we had some background, and also developing products with many companies. So we had already established an alternative test protocol based on high efficiency filter medias, ISO 29463, if I recall it right. So we applied that specific test rig that we have been built by ourselves, and actually we have also provided those to our customers. And with that system, you can basically measure the filtration efficiency with particles, both with the medical face mask, but also filtering half mask, and let's say the media that are developed for those. So it's quite versatile and it's quite fast. So one measurement is about 10 minutes, and we made 3 parallel measurements. So in 30 minutes, you got the result. So it's very good for screening and also product development work. So basically, you can be sure that some quality is enough, and then you go to the certified tests, basically. But we made this testing quite a lot. I think there were thousands of samples. We haven't had a record. I would guess it's something like 5,000 measurements, perhaps, during those years and after. So it was very hectic, but I think we mainly served Finnish government and Finnish companies, and those days in Finland, it was very active. Many companies were interested in, let's say, developing and producing masks, and many actually did those, and we were, let's say, involved with all of the major players in Finland. So very much activity from the governmental side and from the company side, and good cooperation network in Finland. Maybe the next question is how this will continue, but I think that's another question. Thank you.
Yeah, that's actually a really good one. And I think we can all ask the same one. Yeah. So I see it's a bit like the same case with Mirtec. So you started, and locally, at least at national level, there were not enough companies or no companies producing masks. So as the companies came into producing masks or importing masks, then develop the technique that enabled them to have a product tested locally. Okay, thank you. Now I will just, because you both, Silvia and you, talk about certification. So I'm going back to my colleague Mark from Centexbel because testing certification. So can you just elaborate on the role of Centexbel during the COVID time for testing and what they could play as a role into the blueprint? Mark.
Thank you. Yeah, our situation was a little different than the two first stories you heard. We were already a few years involved in testing specifically surgical masks. And to be honest, we were one of the handful of labs globally to do these tests because the demand, the offer and demand were linked. So if the demand is not high, there are not many laboratories or other companies interested in offering these services. If there's no request, you don't start offering the test anyway. So that, of course, made us one of the biggest targets ever for sending masks to. But I need to make one major comment, which also I didn't, to be honest, see in the report. And I think it's also could help a lot in future to prevent this overload of testing requests happening, because a large part of the tests that we performed were in case of doubtful suppliers or doubtful supplies, imports from all over the world, mainly of course Asia, if they were sent over. Because and the doubt was not specifically because there were so bad quality masks, because to be honest, if we would evaluate the results, that was not really the case. So these masks were okay, I don't say 100%, but they were not as bad as they were I suspected to be. So that would have avoided a lot of testing, because testing good masks is not really necessary. So one of the major reasons why there was this high demand was because just the lacking of knowledge of these people who started importing these masks. So they didn't have the correct paperwork. They didn't know how to import a medical or put on the market in Europe a medical device, for example. So not even the most basic knowledge was present at these companies that were selling or importing these masks into Europe. And that was one of the, to be honest, one of the major activities we had, is trying to avoid first this. And then secondly, we in cooperation with authorities, we proposed what they called an alternative test protocol. So a reduced a kind of pre-screening like is put in place in the blueprint, like to pre-screen and say, okay, do we need to do the full testing schedule to be able to identify the quality, yes or no? So that's also a very big activity we had. So we're reducing, apart from increasing our capacity when working almost 24/7 and so on, but a part of this was also putting in place some alternative protocols. On the certification side, so for medical face masks, it's auto-certification, which was the issue, which was the problem, because people didn't know how to do that. So that's one issue. But on the protective FFP type masks, we were not involved yet in testing nor certification, but there was some, what we at least could do very quickly was starting up this certification activity. So we added these type of products to ours, or we asked or introduced this to the European Commission and asked to add it to our scope, and that worked very quickly. So there was a very quick procedure available at the time to get a certified, to get us recognized as a notified body for these equipments. And then lastly, also looking for alternative type of products. So there was the, you have, of course, the medical face masks were primarily required to help the medical professionals, so in hospitals and nurses and doctors. So there was the alternative of what type of products can be used to protect the general population. So there we were also very active in developing the new technical specification for what they call now community masks. And then we also proposed there an alternative testing scheme which didn't interfere with testing of surgical masks, so that we just could increase the capacity by using alternative test methods instead of using the same test schedule, for example, for surgical masks and community masks, which wouldn't help the capacity problems at all anyway. So that's the third thing that we did during the pandemic.
Okay, thanks a lot, Mark. So actually, it's really broad. It's kind of including the experience of VTT developing a new method, because like what was done for the community masks, to have them accessible to the broad public. And the main reason is because they did not exist before. So it was making something new, but also not making the requirements so strict, like the surgical masks, which are supposed to be used in at hospital. Okay, now my face will be jumping around because I see you moved on my screen. Yeah. And so, and also at the same time, it's also increasing the capacity. Also, Centexbel was able to already test some masks, surgical masks, increase the capacity to be able to test and certify FFP masks. So this is really, yeah, at least I see Centexbel role to Guillem. I really like your introduction because you point out that during the COVID time, Fab Labs also were involved into contributing, as many companies, but especially Fab Labs contributing because of your large experience in research and also innovating with different products. So can you just tell more about this, like the contribution of Fab Labs, and especially for a pioneer, I should say, Fab Lab like in Barcelona?
Yes, sure. Actually, I'll have some slides to share. I'll bring them now, and then we can also continue the conversation after on top of those slides, just to give a bit of context of what I was saying before. Very quickly.
You can go ahead to share them.
So, I mean, to give a bit of context, I think we all agree that I think it took us all as a surprise the lack of resilience of certain very industrialized areas when it came into giving a response to the COVID crisis, right? It was a bit of an expected lesson, I think, especially for Europe, to know actually that being the fathers of the Industrial Revolution, yet we had to import so many goods from the outside that we're not capable to produce ourselves. And I think these, together with the supply chain disruption that came after, not only for medical and protective equipment, but for general goods, has shown the need for other means of production, which they don't need to compete directly with the existing ones, but are there to complete or complement the existing ones. And I think a clear example of this happened live during the COVID times. We try to make sense of it, of all these, let's say, interests and all these passion that certain persons, certain collectives, certain people connected, if we like to say, with the maker movement brought during the COVID, in a way to produce and design collectively medical support equipment, protective equipment. And we try to make sense of that in a book which is called Viral Design, which we'll discuss more after. But I thought that what was very relevant to bring here was actually the idea that a distributed network, such as the Fab Lab network, such as the Makerspace network, that share certain means of production. It's important to understand that the goal of these kind of networks has been always to share certain ways to produce, in the way that a design could very easily travel through the internet and be replicated. So this idea, connected with the contact, with the connection with the local context that happened during COVID, of all this network, is what allow us to to give this kind of response. The viral design book covers this approach by on selecting a group of very top, let's say, European Fab Labs, maker spaces, and design experts that are part of the distribute and design platform that we lead here at Fab Lab Barcelona at IAAC, and try to identify which are at the end the results of this process, and basically to collect best practices. So I'll have time after to discuss a bit more about them, but I think for me the biggest learning that we got is that this movement, this way of working was resilient enough to in a very short time provide an output that was helpful in a way, yet it struggled very much to comply with any sort of certifications because there are not certification processes designed to work in such a short time. And moreover, because that's a community that's not very much used to work under the traditional standards of certifications. But yet I think we all agree that when it comes to medical devices and medical equipment, certification is key to ensure actually that this performs the way it is expected, and moreover that we don't put any life at risk. So for us, it's been very interesting here during the RESRVIST project to start researching how we can bring certification more close to this, and especially looking at what's going on in other open source and open hardware scenarios that are much more mature than the one I'm talking about, such as, for example, the use of Linux in medical devices, such as, for example, the use of certification procedures in the RESRVIST project. That's kind of the Linux of 3D printers, or let's say the biggest open hardware project so far that exists, that thanks to it, we got, let's say, low-cost 3D printers more than 10 years ago. So also seeing what procedures they are following, I think it's very important to try to see how we make that connection. So in case of upcoming emergencies, we can replicate some of the best practices that happen there, but ensure that those results are certified either before as designs, but as well as when they are produced, because that's one of the complexities there. It's to validate the design, but as well to validate the distributed manufacturer part. And that's a very big challenge, I think, to confront us. So I stop here because I know there will be more questions on that topic after. So I'll go more closely into the viral design topic in a few minutes.
Marion, you want to take over for the question? Actually, yeah, I can start with one and then maybe you take over, because it's like collaboration look like to be a key point, but then it's never exactly the same. On your case, Guillem, I have the impression it's like it needs to be collaboration between like the producers. They have to know about the existence of those fab labs or what they can do there, because yeah, I will go, maybe the 3D printing example came to me easier. There are equipment that can be placed everywhere, so somehow there may be a producer or manufacturer that have parts that can be 3D printed, so somehow maybe they don't have to be made in a really critical or sterile environment like many of medical products. So in this case, collaboration will be what you call the being able to kind of have them compliant with what exists, and this make a really, really big challenge. So do you have, I don't know, some collaboration with some companies in the Fab Lab of Barcelona already? Some companies that are willing, I mean, to work with you and integrate it, and how does it work actually?
We are not currently working with any company on the certification process, yet that's something that it's for sure very interesting to work with. I think at the moment what we are doing is to researching much more deeply into existing experiences that yet maybe didn't work with maker spaces, didn't work with medical equipment, yet they work with the concepts of open source and distributed manufacturing. The US military, for example, has performed a lot of in-depth research on the use of 3D printers on the field to produce, let's say, produce goods when in very remote areas and so forth, with the idea that they can basically produce more or less any replacement part for their equipment. I think it's an interesting topic to ensure actually what procedures they are setting in place to ensure that that's happening. Then we also designed during the first stage of the RESRVIST project a way to assess the capacity of fab labs to produce certain parts on ventilators based on the certification standards. So what we did is to assess basically what parts on a ventilator needed to be certified, and from then on ensure if actually for the ones that they didn't need to be certified, there were already existing open source designs for that, and in the case they weren't, like how much it will take to do that. And then the opposite, for the ones that they required certification, also try to set actually what are the standards, so we go from the validation of validation of the list of distributors that produce that part, etc., etc. I think what's key for to us here is that yet maybe sometimes we cannot produce a fully certified product. We can produce some parts of that product that later it could be certified. And that was an important topic when we talk about ventilators, because there's some parts that is easy to buy them certified, because there's a lot of manufacturers and suppliers who actually develop that part, which means that in a situation of a stress in the supply chain, we won't go into a vendor lock approach, let's say. However, for others, this is the main issue, right? That even though we have a very well-designed ventilator that we could assemble locally in this case, and I'm talking about ventilators, but we could talk about different equipment, what happens is that they are based in very specific parts that in the case of a disruption in the supply chain, it might be very difficult to continue producing them. And so assessing which of these parts actually could be produced using methods that actually are available and that are very rapidly to start producing, such as 3D printers, right? We don't have to go and put to work a new injection molding machine to do so. It's very key. Yet the limitation there, of course, has been certification. On this sense, something we're also, on this direction, something that we are also doing is to see also how other open source hardware projects are promoting certification. For example, for the RESRVIST project I mentioned before, which is the kind of the biggest open source endeavor to design open hardware 3D printers, and a lot of the existing low-cost 3D printers, either they are RESRVIST compliant machines or are based on existing RESRVIST designs, they put certain, let's say, documentation to ensure that people who's actually designing those machines and want to sell them can, for example, pass the 2006 42C directive, right? That's needed for consumer appliances. Yet this is something that, of course, sometimes documentation is not enough, especially in the case that you need very high-end laboratories. And I will say here it's the moment we are now. Is it possible to design certain tools that allow validation on the field, or this certification process only could happen in very specific labs? If this is the case, how we make the connection in this case to basically be able to certify that? And how much is the certification of the final, let's say, of a sample of the final production, or how much is the certification of the design? No, which I think it's something that, of course, we're learning here a lot from you, as all of you are experts in a way or another in medical devices certification.
Yes, maybe I can complete and also like reorientate a bit the discussion. I think we had the blueprint that was described by Gertrude is super clear how the manufacturer, also there is a diversity of manufacturer. We talk a lot about the mask, but there is many products that can be certified, and as you were saying also, they are not have to be all certified. There is different usage and uses. So maybe what we would like also to see with this discussion around the practice of makers, and maybe this, we can say, alternative practice of manufacturing, we can also open the floor for maybe some also alternative practice of certification that has been done in your lab that were like new for you, as you were saying. I would now put the discussion on what we call distributed what is distributed? And from just few elements of answer from what we already discussed, there is this aspect of relocalization of where we do the production. So as Mark was saying, if it's for testing a lot of products that come from outside, inside the crisis, maybe it's not the best way. How we can benefit from local company, local certification center, and also maybe create activity for them beyond crisis. So we are more resilient in terms of production and the quality at the end of the product. So there is this part of localization. After distributed is also mean that we are a network collaborating inside different nodes distributed. So we know each other and there is a part of collaboration. And as Guillem was introducing, there is a lot of documentation, knowledge that need to be shared. And we know that in this kind of crisis, sometimes we lose ourselves in where to find information. So it's true that this project, RESRVIST, also asked for this question on how we can foster the collaboration and having a more transparent way to work and a better documentation. We can say alternative practice of manufacturing. We can also open the floor for maybe some more alternative practice of certification that has been done in your lab that were like new for you, as you were saying. I would now put the discussion on what we call distributed. What is distributed? And from just few elements of answer from what we already discussed, there is this aspect of relocalization of where we do the production. So as Mark was saying, if it's for testing a lot of products that come from outside, inside the crisis, maybe it's not the best way. How we can benefit from local company, local certification center, and also maybe create activity for them beyond crisis. So we are more resilient in terms of production and the quality at the end of the product. So there is this part of localization. After distributed is also mean that we are a network collaborating inside different nodes distributed. So we know each other and there is a part of collaboration. And as Guillem was introducing, there is a lot of documentation, knowledge that need to be shared. And we know that in this kind of crisis, sometimes we lose ourselves in where to find information. So it's true that this project, RESRVIST, also asked for this question on how we can foster the collaboration and having a more transparent way to work and a better documentation. So yeah, I would say this also saying that after we put inside, we say that we need distributed manufacturer. We have a diversity of people that could be super experts from non-experts that want to produce and want to contribute to something because they face a problem locally. Also, it's about training and it's about accompany the people to really get to know what is the complexity of the product, complexity of the certification, and there is really a process that could be done at this moment. So just with this element of reflection, I would propose you to do another round of discussion. Maybe, I don't know if Guillem, you have other example to share, or if we go already to some maybe feedback from the other speaker, what do you prefer?
I mean, I don't have many more specific examples to go here and explain. I mean, at least let's say, I mean, I've been like dropping some, and I would very much like if someone has interest in some of the things I say that I would emphasize. Maybe the only thing I'll do just kind of to wrap up this introductory phase on certifications of open source and distributed platforms would be to quickly share back my screen, and I would simply just go here and just tell you very briefly or learnings from this concept of viral design. So this concept of viral design was established by the Distributed Design platform back in 2020. It's being published on a book you can all download from distributeddesign.eu. That's a project which is actually sponsored by the, it's co-financed by the Creative Program of the European Union. And just very briefly, you know, I just wanted to discuss these topics that one of the members of the platform, Open.lab in Milano, put together. And this was in a way just trying to make sense of what was happening, right? Because no one actually made a call for these people to start producing, for example, protective equipment or ventilators. And what we found out after, how these actually, these emergent a group of people organized or were working, or what were the commons that the common, let's say, ways of working that we could identify. So first of all, viral design changes. It generates many solutions from a single one, even if it adjusts up to different local realities. That's very important, right? This idea that people was adapting to the specific local needs from the different medical teams, for example, when it comes to masks, as well as adapting into the realities of material supplies, the machines available, etc. So this idea of adaptability and change. Viral design first diverge. One solution generates many so that their effectiveness can be tested. That's important too. I mean, I think like in a traditional scenario, no one will agree that an emergency scenario is the one to test things, yet that happened, right? Like these designs were not designed and tested before. Viral design is disseminated. It means that it has not really made of bits. Let's say it travels through the internet. Let's say one group will develop something, post it into a Telegram group, to put you an example, and then others will take it. And so knowledge that is easily disseminated through the networks and platforms. Viral design then converge, and that's very important. We are not talking here only of, look, I got that design and I'm making it and I'm modifying it and that's all, because there's an effort, right, to concentrate this production effort to the most effective solutions and selecting the de facto standards. And that happened. We saw people actually basically feeding back onto these Telegram groups, into those processes, actually what they were doing, and that was very important. Then viral design is open, and that's of course it's a key idea, because it's what allowed this process of sharing, and we can discuss much more later in licensing and when the things should be fully open, not open, etc. But open, I think it's very important also because it touches to the idea of auditability, right? That's something that we all know in a way from open software. It's the idea that we are not hidden ourselves on a wall, so we can actually, anyone, any expert can go and start to audit what we are doing. And this collective intelligence, it's very relevant there. Then viral design is collaborative, and I think it's very relevant. We said that, no? So each stage has an actor who can undertake the stage better than the others. The project, change hands too many times to provide faster and more effective response. And finally, viral design is collective. Everyone has a role, and we actually, when we analyze different collectives, we found that this was not just one person doing that thing. There were like many people actually working together in many different fields, and combining their efforts, from the people more close to the hospitals, one more close to make a movement, many volunteering that didn't have any experience, etc., etc. So, I mean, I don't know that, I know that's not the topic of today. We're more on certification, but I thought giving an idea of that was relevant, in particular for people who's willing to learn more about this topic and would like to go and download the viral design book that tries to make sense of the thing that happened in such an emergent scenario, and that sometimes it's hard to understand actually what happened and what didn't happen, in this. So if anyone is interested, I would very much suggest to go and download the viral design book from distributeddesign.eu.
Great, and it's true, this book is really illustrating the practice, and we saw different design, we see the work with different community, and I think it's really, it talks a lot about this emerging practice. I would like to listen now about the other speaker that are more used to work with more classic company. I don't know if you experience in your ecosystem also this, I don't know, to work with the maker movement, or people that maybe have created design during the COVID and that needed some validation, and you support them in doing that. Or if you have a general discussion on maybe constraint challenges that could fit the discussion. Also, I know, for instance, that we talk a lot inside the RESRVIST project about the open source aspect, which is something inside company that is quite critic, and it's something that when we open the discussion to emergency crisis, really there is a new window that is open, that maybe some element that you are not sharing normally, you can share it during the crisis, because we need to respond in a fast way, and also because it maybe other people can produce, can certify. So it's a matter of like making the knowledge like displacing from one place to another. So I don't know, maybe Mark or Gertrude from Centexbel, has you can do a duo of a response. Yeah, if you have any comments or
once I would want to cliché, I let Mark go forward.
Yeah, sorry, I have difficulty getting my thoughts straight here with all this new information, to be honest. I think the most concern I have, and I hope that RESRVIST can give an answer to this, is, and the question was already there were a lot of initiatives locally. I mean, as a lab, we worked for the entire world. So globally, in this sense, for me, was a little bit strange, because why would you explicitly need a testing house in your own country when there is one just in the, I mean, across the border? I mean, that's really what happened. I mean, governments in France, in Holland, where there were no labs, they say, why do we have to send these masks to Belgium? Why don't we have our own capacity? Of course, that's one of the big issues was, okay, they had to wait for an answer because we were overflooded. But I mean, like I say, also a lot of these, there was a lot of unnecessary testing involved as well. So that's another issue that surely needs to be taken a look at. And then sharing information about certification and testing, I think that's already an open platform, because all these standards are being developed by in common in Europe or even globally in ISO level. So, and that's, but also there, the participation of people not in these, not active already in the certain fields, of course, they don't, at the point of when let's just say mask certification of mask standards, nobody was interested. There was only a handful of people in these committees. Now it's different. Now there's 25, 30 different countries actively involved in updating these standards. And I just can hope that it will continue, because once the interest slows down, like just to give a local example, in Belgium, there were at least 10 initiatives to start manufacturing surgical masks. Now there's one left, and he's struggling. So that's already on the manufacturing side, yeah, being flexible. And also, as far as I can see, these machines cannot be used for manufacturing anything else. So you make masks or you don't make masks using these machines. That's an issue. If you cannot make another product which you can sell on a day-to-day basis, then you stop manufacturing and you sell these machines, or you put them you send them back to where they came from, basically. So that's my general comments on certification. Yeah, you can see the increase not only of testing but also certification. On the medical devices side, there was another issue, because there was just the new legislation being becoming active, the new medical device regulation that was now postponed for 1 year, and so on. That didn't help, of course, the capacity and certification, because there were not so many notified bodies already recognized to certify according to the new legislation. So that didn't help this, especially on the field of medical devices. That didn't help, of course, because at the moment it's increasing, so now should be more than enough capacity. But as there is a new legislation, all the certificates needs to be updated. So you can imagine, at the moment, if is there a new pandemic tomorrow, we will have the same problem.
maybe just a naive question, but if there is a new product design emerging, what would be the procedure for being tested and certified? It's while during the crisis, for instance, there was a new version of some product that were created.
That's a very
processes?
good remark and very good question, because I still have them also. There were a lot of new type of materials, new type of designs of masks, and specifically masks in this case, because that was why I was contacted. And I still have I need to still create a display of all these magnificent inventions that were created, but to be honest, never probably reached the market. And that is, in a way, one of the issues there was the certification and testing, because these designs and materials were not suited to be tested according to the current standards. So, and of course, that's what standards development is. It's always a little bit lagging behind the new designs, the new type of products on the market or becoming developed. And then these alternatives don't fit the way that the traditional type of materials or articles are being tested and certified. Yes, and that's also an issue, because there's no of course there were some exceptional or exceptions allowed. European Commission, the legislator, gave some leeway or gave some flexibility in the sense that you could certify or test or bring to the market by alternative tests products which didn't fit the exact standards. But on the other hand, it's also always clear, and that's I think also a task for the future is, and in general, like standards, it's not a subject that many people like to study or being involved in. So the knowledge about them is also fairly limited. And so that, like I said, that didn't help the bringing to market of products, because people didn't know how to comply with legislation, how to have the correct paperwork and so on, which would have avoided a lot of retesting, to be honest. And on the other hand, the new designs, but they can be, if you feel as a manufacturer or a developer confident about the quality and you have done some alternative tests, that will also be suitable normally for the certification process. So there is no legal obligation to use the officially existing standard test methods. You can use alternatives like they have been developed at VTT and our alternative testing protocol. So you can use alternatives to show compliance with the legislation. So as long as this happens, but and Guillem already mentioned it, of course, you don't want to risk any health issues or major disasters with the patient. So that's the first thing. But I think nobody developing new products is having this in mind. I just want to make money. I don't care about the patient. So that's not the case, because a lot of the developments I've seen came from the medical world, because there were even surgeons and doctors developing themselves because they didn't find the right mask on the market. They made them themselves, or they asked, they had their own network of people and they developed it together. So I think they always kept the final goal in mind of keeping the patient safe and preventing diseases. So I think there, but I think the basic problem there is the knowledge of the procedures, and not only with the general public or the designers, but also we are guilty of the same, because we tend to stick to our direct use of the specific standards we know about, and the certification procedures are not flexible and so on. So that's I think also a general remark, is just improving the knowledge of all these systems and the links of standardization testing with showing compliance with legislation, how you do that, what are the requirements, and so on.
Yeah, I listened the word flexibility. Flexible certification would be something really to work, whatever the stakeholders. It's a nice feedback. Silvia or Hannu, do you have any comments about this discussion? Yeah, Silvia?
Well, I just wanted to say that I totally agree with what Mark was saying before, that there is obviously no reason why one company could not send their products abroad for testing and certification. So I think the idea of having this distributed testing and certification scheme is not to disrupt the normal workflow when things are running smoothly and the demand is controllable or moderate. But the problem, for example, at the period of COVID was that the few certification labs were completely overloaded. So in situations like that, such schemes could offer higher flexibility to exploit the capacities of different labs. Because, for example, in our case, since we cannot handle bacteria in Mirtec, so we could not do one of the tests without having some significant investments. And this means that we could not perform the full set of tests required for certification. But through this scheme, we can still have a role. We can take some overload, let's say, from the actual certification labs. And I guess this the same model could work also for other types of products, because this may happen or may not happen again for face masks. But the idea is that we now have developed a model of how we could quickly adjust the process.
Yeah, maybe just a quick remark. That's key. I think also the communication, because everybody was focused on their local requirements, local questions, because they overflooded everything else anyway. So, yeah, sure. I think we just need to keep in mind that we will need to be open in sharing, because the problems were the same in different countries, but each was looking for their own specific solution. So if we can do this distributed like this project is aiming at, that would be nice, so that there is some kind of ex-border or international or whatever type of corporation or platform already there, where, okay, this happened, so let's put our heads together and see what we can do and come up with as a solution, not only for a specific region or area, which we did. I think that was my frustration also, is yeah, why would you double the developments in each country for their own local market needs? So I think that surely is a good solution for the future.
Yes, maybe from my side, I would say that perhaps the advice is to make as much possible in advance. So make all the paperwork, make all the certifications and that sort of things, beforehand, when it is not such a rush. I think that's a learning point for all of us. And I think this kind of certification schemes is bringing up some, let's say, more formal cooperation also at European level, not only national level. And I look very much forward for this, let's say, more rapid ways of certification when you have a product already certified earlier and you are ramping up the production again. So that should be a quite streamlined process to be able to produce certified products again. And that sort of things I'm very interested to see. And I guess we all share about the market situation, the fluctuation, and let's say difficulties that it brings, and it perhaps goes a bit outside the certification, let's say, topic, but I think we should be also able to think how much we value preparedness and how much we can pay for preparedness. And this is perhaps more on the, let's say, governmental bodies, and just thinking about many of the lines that have been established, and now there's not so much work with them. So how we can continue this, let's say, through, let's say, storaging and having production now and then, just to keep the ability up in a, let's say, reasonable level, because it is very fluctuating market and it's no reason to just produce to storage of these products. So it is, certification is one part of this big puzzle.
Yeah, I think we see with the project there is a lot of challenge for the next challenge next phase that we are going on. Guillem, you had some feedback. I think now we can do a small round, final round of comments. What you think are the next challenge? What will be the action to put in practice? So we will start with Guillem and we do a small round, and after we do some conclusion with Gertrude. Quite short.
Okay. Thank you. Maybe it's not that matter. It was more of a question to Mark, but I hope that Mark maybe could answer it, when he's doing this closing part too. I just wanted to know if you, Mark, could emphasize a bit more in taking, let's say, a standard product such as, for example, mask as a protective equipment in the certification product. How much is in certifying the product? How much is actually on certifying the machine or the facilities that produce that product? And if there's any kind of recurrent certification that's needed, because that's important to then start to understand what kind of more agile certification methods we could bring to, let's say, these kind of more emergent market or emergent use of distributed manufacturing systems such as 3D printers, maker spaces, etc.
So you asked the question again.
Yeah, let me go very specific. So if we take a standard product like mask as a protective equipment, how much it's on certifying the mask? So you take one sample, a pre-production sample, and then you certify it. How much is also that you need certain certifications of the facilities or the machines that make that mask, and how much it's, of course, in the recurrent certification or recurrent procedures you need to do if you want to sell that product. I'm asking for a very specific, let's say, product mask. I know many different products might have different procedures, but as a test case.
If you refer to how much, in time or money, I think, yeah, like you mentioned, depends on the requirements that you need to reply to for if it's a medical mask or a protective mask. If you have to go through, if it's a certain high risk protection or medical device, you need to go through the notified body, so then you cannot certify your article yourself. So you need to go through a third party, and of course that like I mentioned, for the medical devices, that will be an issue for a certain time, because like I say, now with the new legislation, all certificates out there need to be revised. So that's a big chunk of work for a limited amount of notified bodies to do. So that didn't help, of course, during the pandemic to certify new products. And to be honest, if the work that's been done by the manufacturer is good, is up to the requirements, then it's just going through the files, seeing if everything is fine, and making the certificate. So that shouldn't take too much time. I think that's a good remark from Hannu, is preparedness. So that and a lot of people were not prepared at all. So I think that also looking to alternative supply of alternative raw materials, for example, is also there, because these raw materials, of course, were not certified or not tested according, and so on. So you needed to go back very far to get this done. So if that would already be present, this basic information for raw materials, that they could have been used in filters or in vacuum cleaners. I've seen raw materials that ended up in masks and so on. So okay, that's a certain preparedness. So seeing, okay, where are some alternative offerings there? And of course, another, and it's mentioned also, the quality and the systems at the manufacturer, so the quality systems, which are a requirement, because the certification is just testing a spot sample. It's not something we can choose in the manufacturing, so the supplier sends us his reference sample to be certified, and then of course it's up to him to show that he can make this reference article day in, day out, every year, for as long as he likes to manufacture the product. So that's also very crucial, and that's also something you can be prepared for, so that all companies that could make related products, or even if you say I'm going to 3D print a certain thing, is to do that in a controlled and quality controlled system already from the start. It's like if you start the design, it already needs to be complying with the legislation afterwards. If you're designing a medical device, you need to, from the start, from the design, already take into account what are the final requirements of my final article, so that you don't design something which in any case will never comply, or you understand, or that you already take into account any alternative test methods or whatever which you would need to develop, because you already from the start know this will never will be able to test using the standard test methods, for example, if you considering the new designs of masks and so on. So I think preparedness and just, again, the knowledge of what do I need to comply with in the end, you need to take that into account when you start dreaming your new product in your bed at night, and then say, okay, you need to look into what are the requirements as well for these type of articles, because that people never took into account. They just decided, okay, this is my wonderful idea, let's make it. And then in the end, they come to a wall saying, oh, I can never get it certified. So if we would have started this earlier in the process, then you could take that into account as well. So I think that's key. And like I say, it's not just the certification of the spot certification of one material. It's also showing that you can qualitatively make this product every day, day in, day out, for as long as you manufacture it. So that's of course, but that's one of the basic requirements of any legislation. If it's toys, if it's any general article, if it's protective equipment, medical device, and so on.
Thank you very much. I think that's been very helpful. If you don't mind, I'll take that just to do now my final, of course, the final wrap up of my part. So I think from what we discussed today, and knowing the experience that I've been sharing here, what we could take as learnings, at least to bring back to the communities that we represent and to support others, it's, I will say, our 4 topics more or less. The first one that you mentioned is very important. It's to identify much clearer what parts could be self-certified and which ones they don't need self-certification. The other one is that the certification, it's chainable, what means that you certified something, but to do so, you need to certify that the raw materials were also certified, which means that bringing different tools to support traceability of the materials used and the procedures used is very important. And that's something, for example, that when these maker spaces started to work in the COVID pandemic, these things were not in place, but could be set in place very easily. Then another one, it's the idea that things are made out of existing parts, which means that there are certain parts that could be certified in advance. And so when times come, let's say we might maybe do some customization in some parts, but we have less to certify, less procedures to do. And then the most important part for me, it's how we start to bring these kind of test methodologies within, let's say, the design process of the part itself, in particular, because I'll say one of the biggest challenges when you work in such heterogeneous systems is how you ensure replicability, no? And I think that we need to take it as a challenge, no, in the way of how actually, when we have these distributed networks of manufacturing, ensuring is not only caring about the open source certified design, but it's also in the open source blueprints that enable to deploy different production facilities that ensure replicability, the facilities as well as the processes that are set there. So we'll take note of that because I think those are very, very interesting and very relevant.
If there is still some time, I could also try to wrap up something. So first of all, I would say that in this RESRVIST project, we have established this great certification scheme headed by Gertrude. And I think this is the starting point for let's say, the work beyond. And we have certain partners here at the moment, but I guess it's, the aim is to grow the network also from the certification side, and taking also new products and new certification capabilities on that. And perhaps I think it might be good also to assess other threats than only pandemics. So I think there's also quite much discussion about other threats and what's happening in Europe at the moment. So maybe also expanding on that side our capabilities and offering. Maybe that's my final word.
Yeah, and just to complete, there is ongoing work also in the work of the RESRVIST project that explore new scenarios, and we didn't go until the certification level, but we already explored different scenario, like of course the natural disaster, the man-made disaster, the blackout, and there is also really good content that is coming, and that will be part on the open resource series. Silvia and Gertrude, I don't know if you have some work to say to final words. Maybe Silvia to start and then Gertrude to conclude.
Well, I think it's clear that whenever products have to be placed quickly on the market and there is a high demand for certification, anything that could increase the flexibility in it is very important. So I think the alternative testing protocols that we heard about from also both Mark and Hannu can be very helpful, especially if they are accepted, let's say, in the whole Europe. And also, I really think that such distributed schemes like the one we are establishing can be a big help. And of course, it's not just about masks. It's that such schemes should be established every time some emergency comes up.
Okay, I just want to reflect. Actually, thank you, Hannu and Silvia, because you perfectly started. It was like to learn from the COVID pandemic and then make a blueprint that will work for masks or the products that are developed within RESRVIST of medical products. But it's actually the same goal. I mean, I can see this apply to any other products for also emergency situation, because it's just about identifying the type of tests that are not always go through the process, what exists as pre-screening steps, which are the alternative tests or checkups, and do you need a notified body to test them or not? So it can basically, this blueprint, at least the idea of a blueprint, I think it comes from engineering, where you really have the idea. As it is, it could be applicable to different types. Of course, here in RESRVIST, since the project is kind of focusing on medical product, we stress this part, but it could be applicable to everything. So yeah, I have the of the conclusion, or yeah, sorry. For for the time. I'll note some keywords of all your presentation, and thank you everybody for your inputs. And I was like, if I look at my note sheet, it looks like a word cloud. But so if I look at like these 3 points, I think 3 points can be highlighted. So basically, the first one will be resilience. So in all your intervention, it clearly comes out that we need more resilience. So this is not just about now we learn from what from the lesson of the COVID time, but the idea is like we don't just learn them and observe them, but what do we do about them? How do we build up, point it out for the local initiatives or for companies that went into manufacturing? So what do we do with that next? So is it just for one time, or all the testing approaches that were learned, or yeah, so it's basically making sure that we can be ready, that we learn from what we faced and we can be ready to tackle next upcoming crisis. And the second point is collaboration. So this collaboration is really at any level. It's mainly also for sharing information. This covers also open information to not only technical person or companies, but it's an important point. If you are manufacturing, let's say, I come back to the masks because it's not obvious, then you have a starting product and you have no idea what should I look up for. I have my equipment, I don't know what I should, because there will always be somebody who knows, maybe in the research center this comes as first, but there will be some experts somewhere, and just a question of finding those people and kind of asking the question and asking for training if needed in order to have information and know who to contact. And also notify, but I know it can be really like some distance, but you can maybe contact those people also to have information. And it's really great to have like now this platform and kind of exchanging, and don't hesitate even after the webinar, just for more questions. And the last part, but not least, is 2 words: time and quality. Both goes together, because it's not just about the quality of your product, but it's also time, as especially for designing the products. It's not that no matter your going to have a good mask and so on, but then you're coming to the testing and then you say, oh, okay, I need to test this, it need to cover the face this way, it need to be able to have this size, then it's already too late. So this why timely quality check is really at the beginning, by thinking about the idea, and maybe you have access to the report, or you can also always ask later. There are actually different open resources at European level already, where you can find information of the different areas as for quality. But of course, it needs some training, maybe for some part, to be able to understand what they are. So we come back to the second point, collaboration. But then it's definitely key here to make sure to think about taking into account the quality requirements when already designing it, and not wait until the end. So yeah, with these words, I would say thank you to everybody for attending this. It was really enjoyable and not easy to find a date, but I'm happy to work out. Thank you, everybody. I don't know, Marion, if you want to share something, closing words.
Yeah, just to conclude, I think we can thanks Gertrude and thanks all the speakers. It was a nice conversation. We will see if we can share everything online, as there was also a problem with some sound at some moment. So resilient collaboration, time and quality, some guideline to work on the future for certification testing. And happy to also share with you that there is other resource coming really briefly, and that is the collaboration between all the RESRVIST partners. And please look at the website; it's quite interesting. Many thanks, and I'm